Hi, welcome to the third week of our Ezra series. This week we're taking a look at Ezra chapter 3. And Ezra chapter 3 is just a beautiful chapter that just connects so many dots throughout the Old Testament and the New Testament. But the basic premise of the chapter is that the Israelites, now it's time, they've come back to Jerusalem and it's time to get to work. So the first thing they do is they rebuild the altar. And the altar was like the center of worship for the Israelites. In fact, in Exodus, I believe, chapter 20, right after God gives the 10 Commandments to the people, the first thing they do is they build an altar. And there's laws about the altar that God gives them. But it's important because that's the center of worship. That's where they give their offerings to God. That the altar is where they come to offer themselves to God, in a sense. And so they rebuild the altar, and it says they immediately start offering the burnt offerings and the sacrifices. You know, they celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles, they celebrate the new moon and all the other festivals. And this phrase occurs throughout the section where it says, as it is written. They put the altar in its place where it was supposed to go. Everything was as it is written. They did things the way God had ordered them to do these things. This is very, very important for them. As if you're going to worship God, you can't just worship God in whatever way you see fit. You worship God the way He's called you to worship Him. And then, it turns, and all of a sudden they say, they did this, but the foundation of the temple had not yet been laid. So they begin to work on getting the supplies to rebuild the temple. And if you look back in First Chronicles and First Kings, where the original temple was built, you'll see a lot of the correlations where they went to go get the trees from the Sidonians, and they brought it down to the sea coast in Joppa, and just all these different correlations. They went to build the temple the same way that Solomon originally had it built, because they realized it was so important to do things the same way. And then after they finished laying the foundation of the temple, that says they just had this celebration. And the old men, the priests that had seen the former temple, it says they wept, wept aloud because of this temple. And it's basically because the temple didn't have as much glory as the former temple. But, the prophet Haggai actually mentions that, as this temple goes forward, it will be more glorious than the former temple. And it's a beautiful scene, because you get people joyously hollering out, and you get people weeping, and it says that you couldn't tell the weeping from the joyful cries, but their shouts of celebration could be heard from a long way away. I mean, this is a loud group of people. This is a beautiful thing. And it's so interesting how many dots that are connected here, just because of the way it begins in the 7th month, which is the holiest month of the year for the Hebrews, for the Jews, and just all the things that line up and just look back but also point forward. It's amazing to just soak it all in. I hope this week, as we look at the small group lesson, you guys are able to kind of connect some of the dots that maybe you never had been able to line up before, never even knew that there were dots that would be connected. Because it's amazing when we see how important the Old Testament is as a foundation for the New Testament. When we look at the Old Testament, we see how it just sets the context and the setting for what we read about in the New Testament. Then the things in the New Testament take on a whole different meaning. They come alive. They make a whole lot more sense to us. And so hopefully this week your faith in God is just strengthened, knowing that He's connecting dots and moving things forward throughout history. So I hope you have a great week with your small group this week, and a wonderful discussion. And I hope the reality of who God is just kind of begins to sink in more and more with each of you guys. So that's it for this week. Have a good one.